Democrats roll up the score with bigger than expected margins of victory in Virginia, New Jersey, and California. We break down the numbers. The Supreme Court sounds skeptical about President Trump's sweeping tariff agenda. Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar was there and joins us to discuss. As the government shutdown drags on, cutbacks to the frequency of air travel have just been announced. We will have the latest. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout and welcome to the rental political marketplace. Yes, of course, there are partisans in both parties who do not move. But if last night's election results proved anything, it is those who decide elections and, importantly, create margins of victory that can confer a mandate are renters. They will move and move fast if dissatisfied. In New Jersey, Virginia, and California, tides that flowed toward Trump just 1 year ago flowed back to Democrats, undercutting MAGA imaginings of realignment. Consider New York City. A Democratic socialist there launched his long-shot campaign for mayor first by going to neighborhoods where Trump most grew his vote in 2024. Zohran Mamdani listened to those Trump voters and won them back last night. Proof that vote renting is very real because you simply cannot find two political figures more starkly different and now on an ideological collision course than Zohran Mamdani and Donald Trump. Affordability, as you probably heard, is and was the coin of the realm in the rental political marketplace. Trump won with it a year ago. Trump-aligned Republicans lost because of it yesterday. Now, California's vote, we should note, was not about affordability, but about redistricting, a proxy for grievances and power plays playing out basically across the country. Now, while affordability dominated, there was something else. Victory speeches, as you well know, summarize the path to, well, victory. And there was a thread in all those speeches last night sure to be woven into next year's politics. For the midterms will occur as America turns 250 years old. That birthday will inevitably lead to assessments of where we stand in relation to our founding creed, our Constitution, the rule of law, and what President Trump's administration represents to all of those things. Here in order, Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, Mayor-elect Mamdani in New York, and California Governor Gavin Newsom.
This is where American democracy was born and where we are still working to perfect it today, where Washington and Jefferson fought to establish a government of, by, and for the people.
We're going to follow Lady Liberty's beacon. We're not going to give in to our darker impulses. Here in New Jersey, we know that this nation has not ever been, nor will it ever be, ruled by kings. We take oaths to a constitution, not a king.
We will usher in a generation of change. And if we embrace this brave new course, rather than fleeing from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength it fears, not the appeasement it craves. After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him.
Next year is the 250th anniversary of the best of Roman Republic, the best of Greek democracy. This fundamental notion of a system of checks and balances, of popular sovereignty, the rule of law. Mr. President, the rule of law, not the rule of Don.
For more on what happened last night, and specifically New York City, I turn quite happily to Ed O'Keefe, who joins us from the Broadcast Center. Ed, great to see you. Give me your thoughts on the night that was, particularly in New York.
Well, in many ways, as Gavin Newsom's earned credit across the country for trying to do something in response to Trump, you saw in Mamdani's victory speech, at least last night, him say a lot of the things Democrats have been wanting to hear Democratic leaders say, and we'll see if he can act on what it is he's vowing to do once the new year begins. But quite a striking scene there at this music hall in Brooklyn that he rented, and taking what had been a very granular operation here in this America's largest city and earned such global attention for what he was able to pull off. And then to use that moment he had with the world watching to attack the president as sharply as he did is going to earn him a lot of fans across the Democratic space today into the next few weeks. But today here in New York, he spent time rolling out his transition team, which among others includes the former Federal Trade Commission leader, Lina Khan, and then and said that he hasn't heard yet from the White House, but would like to talk to the president, even though he will call him out when he's doing or saying things detrimental to city residents. So he's got about 57 days to go until he becomes mayor. And the president down in Miami today, speaking to business leaders, made very clear he's got his eye on whatever it is Mayor-elect Mamdani is planning.
What does Mayor-elect Mamdani have planned, Ed, as much as he has outlined it, with policing in New York City and potential immigration enforcement from the Trump administration in the Big Apple?
Well, he had announced a few weeks ago that he's keeping the current NYPD Commissioner, Jessica Tisch, in place. Tisch, of course, a well-known, respected name in the city because her father was a major business and philanthropic leader, and ultimately has said that he's working with her to ensure that city residents are safe. And again, in rolling out this transition team today, the thought is that ultimately they'll start to lay out their plans, and you can expect that he's going to be hiring a suite of different people from across the political left, not necessarily the far left, not necessarily the socialists to put him in place. And the more that this city sees the kind of people he is set to employ, the belief is that, support, or at least the concerns about his leadership will dissipate. A handful of those Wall Street types that have been threatening to leave the city, even today, were admitting that, I want to work with this mayor, I want to support him and make sure the city's in good shape, which would suggest that those pleas or those vows of billionaires to leave the city may not necessarily materialize in the way they threatened.
Ed O'Keefe in New York. Appreciate the time, sir. Thank you very much. For more on Election Day results, we are joined now by CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, break down New York and the rest of what we saw last night.
Major, you said at the top, you talked about Trump voters, and it reminded me a year ago, you and I stood at this board, and we had seen those shifts in New York City, too, where Donald Trump had made gains. He had cut into that Democratic coalition, right? A lot of voters. And it kind of gave me an idea. So here's a map of New York. Here's Mamdani's wins. The dark blue areas are the neighborhoods that he wins, right? Well, let me pull up some examples of those kinds of voters. The dark blue areas dark purple areas I just lit up here, these are heavily Hispanic neighborhoods. So watch what happens when I then put in last night's results. Boom, they turn blue. He did well with Hispanic voters. I'm going to do the same thing with, let's say, black voters. These areas down here, more heavily black neighborhoods, put in the results, boom, he does well with black voters. He starts to put back together those parts of the Democratic coalition that they lost to Donald Trump last time. And I'm going to pull up this because this one's kind of fun. 2024 Trump voters in New York City, yeah, most of them go for Cuomo or Sliwa. That's what you'd expect. But 9% of them vote this time for Mamdani. What makes someone vote for Donald Trump and Mamdani? The answer to that is there are people who say they just want, each time, they just want change in the system, Major.
And elsewhere in the country, New Jersey, Virginia, California, we saw pretty much identical trend lines of margins outside what most people were expecting.
Yeah, let me take you across the river here to New Jersey. Here's the Mikey Sherrill win, and it's kind of a good example because if I take that, and let's go back to 24 again, right? Give you the example here. She outperforms what Kamala Harris got, that 56 to that 52, and she does it in and around these key areas up here in northern New Jersey, right? These are places all that sort of exemplify the kinds of places, they're suburban. Democrats typically win them when they do well. She does better there this time, and that's part of the tale. Democrats starting to put back together what they had lost in 2024, a common theme throughout the night, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, great stuff as always. I appreciate it. We move now to the Supreme Court and a very important case heard today on President Trump's tariffs. The majority of justices appeared skeptical during oral arguments that the president can use a federal emergency power law passed back in the 1970s to unilaterally impose tariffs. Jan Crawford joins us now from outside the Supreme Court. Jan, what did we hear today, and how did that skepticism manifest?
Well, I mean, Major, it was a pretty rough sledding to get things going for the Solicitor General of the United States, John Sauer, who, of course, is representing the Trump administration here. You know, he's arguing, like you said, that 1977 law gives the president this authority because it says presidents can basically regulate imports when they declare there's a national emergency. And they're saying that's where tariff kind of comes in under regulating imports. But I mean, Major, within minutes of him getting to that podium and standing in front of all 9 justices, he ran into a united liberal wall. And the conservatives weren't really far behind him. I've got 3 key quotes that I want to play here and let you take a listen to. The first is from Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the senior liberal on the court, expressing her skepticism, quickly followed by the Chief Justice, John Roberts, and then his fellow conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch. Major, just take a listen to this.
It's a congressional power, not a presidential power, to tax. And you want to say tariffs are not taxes, but that's exactly what they are. They're generating money from American citizens, revenue.
The exercise of the power is to impose tariffs, right? And the statute doesn't use the word tariffs.
Congress, as a practical matter, can't get this power back once it's handed it over to the president. It's a one-way ratchet toward the gradual but continual accretion of power in the executive branch and away from the people's elected representatives.
So with Sotomayor and the 2 other liberals and then those 2 conservatives, you got 5, right? I mean, it's pretty easy. 3 + 2 is 5. That's all you need for a majority. But I'm going to have a caveat here because as the argument went on, we heard some of the other conservatives making some pretty interesting points, including, as Justice Sam Alito said, there's another law that the president could point to justify these tariffs. And so while, yes, it seems likely that the administration is going to lose here, I think, Major, I remember vividly standing on this sidewalk, shoulder to shoulder with, dozens and dozens of commentators and everyone confidently predicting the Supreme Court was going to strike down President Obama's signature achievement, Obamacare. And obviously, John Roberts went with the liberals in that case and saved that defining moment legislation of the President Obama. I'm not sure it's as likely in this case. I think he's pretty committed to ruling against President Trump, but anything can happen. And I'm not even sure the justices quite know how they're going to decide the legal path to reaching a decision in this case, Major.
Jan Crawford, outside the Supreme Court, thank you very, very much. Earlier today, I further discussed this case with Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who opposes President Trump's tariffs. Please take a listen. What were your impressions of what you heard from the justices, and are there larger stakes for this case than just the future of Trump tariffs?
Oh, there are. The future of capitalism, I would start with, and the future of making our economy work for small businesses and farmers and ranchers. They're the ones that are roadkill in this whole thing because they don't have the reserves to pay for the parts for their machinery. Their farm soybean markets are drying up and the like. I'd say the atmosphere in there was kind of fitting for how serious this is. The justices, every single one of them, asked pointed questions, but what I noticed the most was at the end when Justice Gorsuch made it very clear that he felt that this power of taxation, as he called it, was unique, that it was Congress's power to delegate. I also saw the skepticism from a number of the justices about the fact that this statute called IEPA, sounds too happy for what it is, has a lot of words in it like regulate and all these things, but it doesn't have the word tariff in it anywhere. And many of the justices noted that, and that if Congress wanted to give this trillion-dollar project of allowing a president to assess tariffs across the world, maybe they would have said it.
When I asked about the stakes, you outlined the economic ones, Senator, but I wonder if there are larger constitutional stakes involved, because it seems to me one of the things the justices are going to have to deal with is this president's sweeping definition of executive powers. And it seems like this case is a very clear example of how he is interpreting things in ways no previous president has.
That's right. And this example just happens to hit home for so many people. There's many other cases where he's asserting that power with regard to criminal prosecutions, with regard to the use of war powers and the like. But the one reason I'm so focused on this, and was one of the senators leading an amicus brief to the court to help them make a decision, members of Congress can file these briefs, is because it really hits home for people. It's an abuse of the power that hits them in their pocketbooks, whether it's the cost of beef or the cost of bananas or the cost of coffee or lumber to build homes. All of this is at stake. And it was also interestingly brought not only by a number of states, but also by a number of small businesses, a fishing apparel small business, ones that are just mom and pop organizations that are just maybe have 1 or 2 employees. These kinds of businesses are really up in arms about this. And I think that's what you saw reflected in the judge's studious review of the facts and the studious review of the law. And so I came out of there being, how will we say in legal terms, Major, cautiously optimistic, cautiously optimistic that maybe we can save capitalism.
Senator, you might have read about it. There was an election last night. I'd like your response to the results. And the president today meeting with Republican senators saying, you've got to end the filibuster now. You have advocated for ending the filibuster before, calling it archaic. I'd like you to evaluate that as well.
Okay, so I believe you can have exceptions for the filibuster, as I did in the voting rights case. But what you have right now is the president knows that's not a reality. There are 15 Republicans, according to Senator Tillis, he has said this publicly, who have come out clearly and said they're not going to get rid of the filibuster. Let's put that aside. What I really noticed that the president said was that they lost for 2 reasons. And he was very clear about this. It wasn't as long as his usual social media posts. He said they lost because he wasn't on the ballot. That's his view, not mine. And he said they lost because of the shutdown. So to me, that was a call, and maybe the first opening we've seen to say, okay, we know this is a problem, and we need to do something about it. And everyone knows the only way this is going to get this done, and I'm glad my colleagues are negotiating in the Senate, but the only really way this is going to get done, Major, is if the president comes to the table. He is, you know, the author of The Art of the Deal. He controls the House. I mean, my God, they won't even come back to work without his okay. They've been gone for 7 weeks. And so we know that he has to be at the table. That's why Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer today said, okay, we're ready to go. Come meet with us. He's not traveling to Asia this week, the president. It's time to meet with them, and let's get the government open, and let's do something about these health care premiums that are hitting all 75% of the people that are hit by them. Doubling of premiums live in states Donald Trump won.
Senator, I ask this of Democrats all the time. What do you personally need to see? Do you need an assurance from the president that he will negotiate, then you'll open the government back up on health care? Or do you need a deal on the table that he is willing to essentially put his name behind before you will vote to reopen the government?
Major, I wish this was so easy as you and I could negotiate this. It's so clear what needs to happen here. I'll put in my 2 cents. I will make clear that I think health care, there has to be something done on health care. But the point is, in the end, the president has to come to the table and negotiate with the leaders of the Congress. Every shutdown, every budget impasse that didn't even turn into a shutdown has been negotiated with compromise. He knows that, and it's time for him to come to the table.
And do you see any prospect of that happening this week?
I would hope so. He's here, and we are ready to go. We are here. House, come on back.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat, Minnesota. Always a pleasure. Thank you, Senator.
Great. Thanks, Major.
Still to come, uncertainty and delays quite possibly coming to an airport near you. Why? Because cuts are coming to the frequency of air travel due to the prolonged government shutdown. What we're learning and how it might impact you. Plus, horrific scenes out of Louisville, a massive UPS plane explosion and crash, the late developing news about the investigation. And what does the Democratic Socialist victory in New York City's mayor's race mean for the Democratic Party nationally? I'll ask Massachusetts Democratic Congressman James Auchincloss. Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. We are following developing news in the government shutdown tonight. Late today, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announced The United States will cut the number of flights leaving from as many as 40 airports as the government grapples with shortages of air traffic controllers and TSA personnel. These reductions will be implemented Friday if the government shutdown continues. Here with me for the latest on this and the UPS plane crash in Louisville, Robert Zumwalt. He is our transportation safety expert and analyst and former chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. Robert, it's always good to see you. What do you make of what the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announced just this afternoon about these cutbacks?
Well, believe it or not, Major, this is the way the system is supposed to work. When we have controller staffing issues or when there's weather, this is the way that the FAA manages their risk. They start reducing the number of airplanes in and out of certain airports. So this is not unprecedented. I was an airline pilot back in 1981 when the air traffic controllers went on strike and subsequently got fired. And that's exactly what had to happen back in those days.
If this goes into effect on Friday, how rapidly will the traveling public notice?
Well, I don't know. I'm flying on Friday, so I hope it doesn't.
Text me to let me know.
Yeah.
But what they should anticipate hearing this news is there's a little bit more uncertainty and a higher probability of delays and possibly even cancellations.
Well, that's exactly right. That's the major point right there. Check with your airline, use your app, see what's going on.
What have you deduced so far, Robert, and what is the NTSB beginning its work looking for in Louisville?
Well, the very good news is that the NTSB has identified the flight recorders, so that's very good news. We certainly hope that they will have usable data. We know for a fact, I mean, it's been confirmed that the engine did depart the wing.
It fell off the wing?
It fell off the wing.
Is that a maintenance issue?
Well, the NTSB is certainly going to look into that. I mean, it doesn't just happen unless there's some sort of an issue. Maybe there was metal fatigue that might have transpired over many, many years. But the NTSB, having worked with those professionals for 15 years, I'm confident they'll do a very good job and get to the bottom of this.
Robert, I'd like your appraisal of something I've heard discussed in the aftermath of this and others recently. There's so many people now who have cell phones and video evidence of things as they're happening. Is that a tool that the NTSB uses that it simply did not have before to understand what actually went on?
Absolutely, and I was a part of several investigations where the cell phone video was extremely helpful to determining what happened. So you're right, there's a lot of video here. The NTSB will put all of these pieces together and they'll find out what happened, most importantly, so they can keep it from happening again.
Massive fireball because this flight was heading to Honolulu laden with fuel, right?
That's right.
And we have at least 10, I believe, confirmed dead, possibly more. This could have been even more catastrophic. Anything else that we should know about what played out in Louisville that's on your mind?
Well, there's a lot of questions, and there's not many answers at this point. But slowly, the facts will start to emerge. And again, I have great confidence the NTSB will figure this out.
Robert Zumwalt, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you so very much.
Major, thank you. Great to have you. Great to be with you.
Still to come, monitoring Mayor-elect Mamdani due to his critical views on Israel. The Anti-Defamation League announces a program to protect Jewish New Yorkers. We will talk to its CEO next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. The Anti-Defamation League and its CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, have announced and launched an initiative to monitor the incoming Mamdani administration in New York and its policies and its appointments to, it says, help protect Jewish New Yorkers. Here is how the mayor-elect has responded to that.
I have not spoken to Jonathan Greenblatt. I take the issue of anti-Semitism incredibly seriously. And last night in my speech, I spoke about how my city hall will stand steadfast with Jewish New Yorkers in fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism across the city and making that clear in the actions that we deliver on from January 1st. And I look forward to working with Jewish leaders across this city.
Jonathan Greenblatt joins me now from the Broadcast Center in New York. Jonathan, welcome back to the program. Do you take the mayor-elect at his word, and do you look forward to talking to him in the near future?
Well, thank you for having me, Major. I think your question gets it right. I take him at his words. That's why we're concerned. So look, he is the mayor of this city. We congratulate him on his election, but our concerns are real because of what he has said, not last night in his acceptance speech, but over the years. He has made comments, he has endorsed policies, he has pushed ideas that have endangered Jewish New Yorkers in a time when anti-Semitism has reached all-time highs. So we launched the Mamdani Monitor in order to track what happens in this administration without bias, without prejudging. We want to see, as you said, who he appoints, what his personnel looks like, what policies he pushes, and what programs he introduces to make sure these keep Jewish New Yorkers safe.
Jonathan, according to the exit polls, 32% of self-identified Jewish voters in New York supported Mayor-elect Mamdani. What, if anything, does that tell you?
Well, look, these numbers last night were extraordinary. Millions of people voted. And it shouldn't surprise us that a number of young Jewish voters voted for Assemblyman Mamdani. They did that because his message on affordability was very powerful. But at the same time, to be clear, promoting ideas like the BDS movement, which espouses, if you will, or purports to be nonviolent, but actually increases violence, or suggests that he's going to cut ties with the Cornell University facility on Roosevelt Island, not because of the quality of its research, Major, not because of its graduation rates, but because it has a connection to an Israeli university. I mean, things like this, or if you will, dignifying the comment, glorify the Intifada, all of this makes Jews nervous because of the levels of discrimination, vandalism, and violence we're seeing. This morning in Brooklyn, blood red swastikas were painted all over a Jewish school. Now, I will credit Mayor-elect Mamdani called it out on X. That's a good thing. But I want his policies, I want his programs to do more than just call it out. I want them to create a city where Jewish New Yorkers and all New Yorkers feel safe, regardless of where they worship or where they're from.
How soon do you expect to meet with him?
Look, he is the mayor of this city, and I may criticize him on the campaign, as I have done, but if he wants to meet with me, I will meet with him today. I mean, we are an institution at ADL. Our job is not to, play for the red team or the blue team. We call balls and strikes. And as an institution, we have an obligation to work with our elected officials, with our policymakers, to make sure that, the policies and programs keep all Jewish people safe. So I would not do that meeting alone, I would say. I would want other communal leaders, spiritual leaders to be part of it. But he's the mayor, and we got to work with him, and we're prepared to do that when the time comes.
Jonathan, I'd like to also have you evaluate the conversation that has been going on for more than a week in Republican circles about Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and the platforming thereof.
Yeah, look, I'm glad you asked. It reminds us that neither side of the spectrum is immune from anti-Semitism. Intolerance happens on both sides, and specifically here. Look, it's not just that the interview with Nick Fuentes that Tucker Carlson did was so repellent, although it was. Tucker Carlson has been laundering hate for years, specifically anti-Jewish bias, Holocaust deniers, ugly anti-Zionists, and all kinds of people. That's the problem here. Now, I will tell you, I was pleased that Kevin Roberts called out Nick Fuentes' disgusting anti-Jewish hatred. But why would you run cover for Tucker Carlson? The Republican Party has got to figure this out. People like Ted Cruz, Dave McCormick, Lindsey Graham seem intent on doing so, and that's a good thing. I hope things work out the right way, just like on the far left. The anti-Zionism and the anti-Semitism of some fringe folks on the progressive side also need to be worked out. Let's hope that that happens on both ends of the spectrum, Major, so a strong center can reemerge where everyone is accepted.
Jonathan, very quickly, Kevin Roberts, you mentioned a significant figure at the Heritage Foundation Action and Heritage Foundation. Would you like to see in this moment President Trump weigh in on Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes?
I think it would be a positive development if the president, who has Jewish grandchildren, has a Jewish daughter and son-in-law, who's done so much to support the Jewish state of Israel and frankly support the Jewish community on college campuses. No one has a stronger voice on these issues than him. If he weighed in, it might be very, very powerful.
Jonathan Greenblatt, always welcome on this program. I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you.
So, are Democrats gaining momentum? Well, that's a question we're going to put to Massachusetts Democratic Congressman James Auchincloss. He joins me next with his appraisal. You're watching The Takeout. You see him right there. Much more handsome than I am. Welcome back. back. President Trump not on the ballot last night, and he's gone out of his way today to let everyone know that he wasn't on the ballot, but clearly he was on the mind of many voters. According to CBS News exit polling, at least 40% of those casting ballots in each of the four most prominent races said he, President Trump, a factor in their vote. The majority of those voters said they opposed him. I'm joined now by Massachusetts Democratic Congressman James Auchincloss. He is the chair of Majority Democrats, a new political group focused on helping Democrats win in competitive races. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Before we get to last night's election, there was breaking news today. Someone you know well and admire, Jared Golden, not running for re-election. Talking about the toxicity of politics, the threat matrix he and his family have to endure, and kind of throwing in the towel on all that. Your reaction?
Jared, good evening. Major, good evening. Jared is not only a colleague in Congress, he's also a close friend of mine. He's a unique winner in the Democratic Party. I think there's very few Americans who could do what he did in the Maine congressional second during the Trump era. He's going to be sorely missed. I know he wants to spend time with Izzy and his two daughters. They deserve that time with him. I just hope he doesn't fully close the door on future forays into public service, because this country needs him.
What does it say to you when someone like him, who you know well, talks about the vitriol, the danger in American politics? Does it in any way discourage you?
He's speaking truth. He's speaking a plain truth, and this corrosion in our civil discourse is really being exacerbated by the social media corporations. They've become the wealthiest, most powerful corporations in the history of the world, and they're doing it by amplifying all of our worst vices, and by turning Americans against one another, and by attention fracking our young people. We need bold policy solutions that hold these social media corporations accountable. I call it touch grass populism. We got to bring the pitchforks to the gates of Meta and TikTok and the rest.
Tell me about your thoughts on Virginia and New Jersey, two governors' races there, with what has been popularly described as centrist-type Democrats, Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, and contrast that with what happened in the New York City mayor's race with Zohran Mamdani.
The lesson for politicians today, Major, is lower prices or perish. Donald Trump came into office. He said he was going to lower prices. He has not. Everything from ground beef to housing has gotten more expensive on his watch. Voters have noticed, and they do not believe his lies about it. Abigail and Mikey and Zohran all shared a relentless focus on affordability. And in particular, Abigail and Mikey, running for governor, talked about solutions across the ideological spectrum to get stuff done. And I know both of those members of Congress, and I can tell you that they have precious little patience for political BS or anything else that will slow them down on delivering for affordability.
What is your assessment, Congressman Auchincloss, of where the nation stands with the now longest in history full-blown government shutdown? It was the longest full-blown government shutdown 2 weeks ago. It's now the longest shutdown of any kind in American history. The Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, late this afternoon said there will be cutbacks in flight schedules, possible cancellations triggering through the system starting Friday. When and how does this end?
This ends when Donald Trump and congressional Republicans take responsibility. They have the trifecta. They're in charge of the White House, the Senate, the House. Everything that happens or fails to happen in Washington, D.C. is they're responsible. That means, yes, the higher prices that Americans have experienced, and also this government shutdown. Before this shutdown happened, I led several other majority Democrats in an open letter of negotiation to Speaker Johnson. We laid out a series of ways to get to yes, whether it was reversing the worst of the Medicaid cuts or reversing the cops grants cuts that have made it harder for local law enforcement to train and recruit new police officers, or giving Congress a vote on the tariffs that have been the biggest tax hike in American history. And it was radio silence. And for the last 7 weeks, the Speaker has refused to even call the House into session so we can do our jobs, negotiate, debate, get to yes on this. I'm ready to fly down tomorrow to do my job, but Republicans have to be willing to do theirs, and they're the ones who hold the gavels.
Any sense when this ends?
This ends when congressional Republicans start caring about their constituents more than they care about Donald Trump's tweets.
Days, weeks, Thanksgiving? What are we talking about?
You're asking me to predict the United States Senate, and careers have washed up on the shoals by trying to do so. I know that we can get to yes, and the reason I know we can get to yes is because I laid out a series of ways that I'm confident a number of Democrats could get to yes. But we need a counterparty. We need interlocutors to actually work with us on policy like we're meant to do. I think we can get there, but it requires Trump to actually work with Congress. For the first 10 months in office, he has marginalized Congress. Speaker Johnson has been complicit in that, and he's turned around and used the middle class as a punching bag. When he actually needed Congress to pass his appropriations, Democrats raised our hand and said, we're not going to fund your government with taxpayer dollars from the middle class when you have levied them the biggest tax hike in American history and the biggest healthcare cut in American history. We are going to stand up for the middle class. They don't have a meme coin or a super PAC or any other way to get in Donald Trump's ear, but they do have the Democratic Party.
Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Good evening.
Department of Homeland Security says it's time for South Sudanese who fled civil war to go home. Details on the change in their immigration status next on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. CBS News has exclusively learned the Department of Homeland Security is planning to end temporary protected status for South Sudanese nationals. This change will end more than a decade of protection that allowed thousands to work and live legally in the United States. Administration officials pointed to the end of armed conflict in the country as a reason for this change. But the United Nations warns peace in South Sudan is fragile and says the country could slip back into a state of warfare. The DHS estimates roughly 5,000 Sudanese nationals are living in the U.S. They will have 60 days to leave the country or face deportation. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered top officials to submit plans to resume nuclear testing during a televised meeting with his Security Council. Russia carried out a test last month that prompted President Trump to announce that he instructed all relevant agencies to, quote, immediately start testing nuclear weapons for the first time in more than 30 years. Federal judge has ordered prosecutors in the criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey to hand over records and evidence to his defense team. Comey's lawyers had previously said they had not seen the documents presented to the grand jury. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick said he was concerned the Department of Justice chose to, quote, indict first and investigate later, unquote. Comey is charged with lying to Congress. The Justice Department has until the end of Thursday to hand the relevant materials over. Whose party is it now? Good question. As candidates from different wings of the Democratic Party celebrate election victories Tuesday, our reporter panel breaks down what it might mean. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. Democrats, as you've probably read, heard, seen, big night last night. Virginia, New Jersey, New York City, California. So let's draw some conclusions. Maybe, maybe not. Our reporter panel will do just that, maybe cautiously, maybe ambitiously. Mariana Sotomayor, congressional reporter for The Washington Post. Deepa Shivrem, White House correspondent for NPR. So you were saying to me before we went on the air, Mariana, there's a Republican freakout going on. Describe
Yes.
what you are hearing.
Yeah, well, first of all, when you don't hear much from lawmakers themselves, you know it's because they don't want to talk.
Right.
Because they have a lot of opinions.
Right.
The ones who are talking still privately, I've talked to a number of House GOP and also Senate GOP campaign strategists. And they're starting to say that if Republicans want to win, keep their majorities, a lot of these candidates are going to have to distance themselves from Trump, which is hard to do.
Very.
Specifically on the economy, specifically on tariffs. And as I just said, Trump sometimes cannot let Republicans go. We see so much. And even when it comes to talking about the shutdown, Republicans want Trump to tell them what to do. The ask now is to make sure that they start moving away from Trump. I mean, they also need Trump's money. That's a big thing I'm now hearing.
Yes.
Fundraising is huge now because they're facing these headwinds. They did not know how big it was going to be. And last night showed Republicans the trouble that they are in.
And Deepa, the White House keeps saying the president's raised a ton of money. The midterms are paid for, according to one report I read this morning. They've got plenty of money, but to get it, you've got to keep on the president's good side. And what he said this morning with Senate Republicans arrayed around him for breakfast is, I wasn't on the ballot, so don't blame me, number one. Number two, end the filibuster, which Senate Republicans do not have the appetite for. No. So already this pulling apart
right, and it also is sort of a really interesting contrast compared to some of the Democrats' messaging from yesterday that turned out to be really successful, was stick to the issues that people want to hear about. The average American is concerned about the cost of living, is concerned about the cost of what it takes to pay for food and rent and everything else in this country. And there were some really successful Democratic campaigns that stuck to that message. You're not really hearing that message from the president, and therefore not hearing it enough from other Republicans. And Trump is sort of taking up that space without a message that's resonating with voters, clearly.
And it struck me that in New Jersey, there was a chance, and Republicans thought they had a chance. Not a grand chance, but at least a puncher's chance of beating Mikey Sherrill with Jack Ciattarelli. And they said, it's been a long time, since the 1960s, that New Jerseyans have voted for the same party to run the governorship 3 elections in a row. That was a fatigue factor. Plus, some of the discontent in New Jersey about affordability could have been laid on the feet of the Democratic Party and the Democratic governor. Mikey Sherrill not only dealt with that, but blew out a victory in New Jersey. That seems to me to be somewhat telling.
Absolutely. And I think when you start to really break down New Jersey, even Republican areas that tend to reliably vote for Republicans shifted to Democrats. I think one thing to watch was the Latino communities that are in some of these areas and pockets of New Jersey. They really swung to Trump last year. Now they're voting for Democrats. The one lesson for Democrats, and I've heard this a lot today, is, you know, there's a lot to celebrate. Our message and our strategy is working, but we cannot be complacent and we cannot take voters like the Latinos for granted. Just because they suddenly swung our way, we still have to continue to court them.
Deepa, what is the coming White House conflict with Zohran Mamdani going to look like as the mayor-elect of New York?
It could look like a lot of things. Definitely could get into personal attacks, on, Zohran Mamdani, who identifies as a democratic socialist, as we've heard him say in his campaign. He's Muslim, he's an immigrant. There's a lot of fodder there for Trump and other Republicans on a very personal level. But it's going to be...
Mamdani says turn the volume up. He's like, bring it on.
Exactly. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see this dynamic play out, not only for Mamdani in New York, but I think a lot of other Democrats are sort of watching to see his playbook, post-campaign, and fighting with Trump. They're going to have to figure that out all the way up until midterms next year.
Mariana, very quickly, what's the congressional republic of it all in New York? Because if Trump does, as he's promised to do, hold back or cancel funding for many New York projects, transit and otherwise, there have to be some congressional Republicans in and around the boroughs of New York who might not like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, New Jersey is a perfect example where that threat did play a role.
Because one of those projects bleeds over into New Jersey.
Exactly. A lot of workers who may not be able to work on those projects live in New Jersey. So this is definitely
not to
something...
mention commute times and everything else.
Exactly. So this is absolutely something that New York Republicans are thinking about. I think had you asked them a couple of days ago, they might not have been as bullish, but just given the results that we saw in New Jersey, I mean, that is going to be significant. They have to pay attention to this more.
Deepa, 30 seconds. Do you think anything that happened last night charges up Democrats as they think about the Senate map, not the House map, next year?
I was talking to a Democratic strategist earlier today who said, some of this momentum and this hope from the election last night, it will go too far for Republicans. It gets in their way, but it might not go far enough for Democrats. And so I think maybe the lesson to take from this is every November is a different November, right? We might be having an entirely different conversation 365 days from now.
You heard it here first. Every November is a different November. I like that. Mariana Sotomayor, The Washington Post, Deepa Shivram, NPR, thank you so much. Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. You know what we are? Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, more than occasionally clever. The Daily Report starts now.